Oh my goodness.
Obama got bars. He really does.
Does.
Like,
So do you,
like
though.
he could. Yeah. He got bars. He could go on that old the old Nick Cannon show where they would just your mama just go back and forth. He's Obama's got that skill.
He really does. And so he's one of the best people you can have campaigning for you. No shock that he is. But what's your your thoughts on the temperature like of this race right now and what the likely outcome is going to be?
Well, so I have to start with this, Nat. I got to ask you this question since, we're Gen Xers or millennials or whatever we may be. Were you Team
Millennial.
Edward or Team Jacob? Because, this whole. This whole conversation of vampires versus werewolves, I just have to know where you're coming from on this. Team Jacob or Edward? I got to know. Which one? Which one?
I'm the vampire. I'm the vampire.
That was
That's
Edward. Yeah,
Edward, right?
That's Edward. Obviously, not a huge Twilight fan when you were in junior high. I'm picking this up.
Yes.
Here's the thing. I think it says something. It says something about the nature of this runoff race in Georgia, right? Which is the last election of 2022 that we have to care about. Although there's apparently a recount that's happening in Colorado with Lauren Boebert and her challenger. That the weekend beforehand, it's not a conversation about judges or taxes or policy or Biden's agenda. We're talking about the fact that the Republican candidate has been dancing around on stage, all up in the videos, all up on stage, talking about vampires and werewolves instead of how he'll actually do his job. Like, that's the story, and that speaks to what's happening in Georgia right now. You have a large group of people who are going to vote for Raphael Warnock, who was in the lead last time because he's at least a competent representative of the needs of the people. And then you have a lot of other people who are voting for a man who quite fairly can not only not count how many children he has, who not only has a history of violence against women, who not only can't keep track of how many children he has aborted, who not only has showed himself to be thoroughly incapable of stringing together 3.5 sentences as his life depended on it, but also a man who routinely associates himself with dangerous policies. So, I suspect that Raphael Warnock is going to end up winning, even though you still have voter suppression in the state. But it is a dangerous, dangerous sign that in the state of Georgia, there are still these 2 million people who think that the man who is seriously debating werewolves versus vampires could still be the representative of their state.
Well, I was going to say all of these qualifications that you listed for Herschel Walker, and yet Bill was able to force a runoff. And of course, won like the white evangelical vote. So, I mean, you just always got to worry about a place like Georgia, So I won't be content until the race is over and I know that, Warnock has actually won.
Now I'll be down there. And I think there's something, and I always think this is important to say. I'm going to be down there covering it for MSNBC. I've paid a lot of attention to those campaigns and Stacey Abrams, Raphael Warnock, all the people who are running. This is, I think, a critical thing that I don't want anybody to ever forget about this race. As silly as this may seem, right? I think there's a lot of people, just like with sports, right? People are like, can't believe, I could do what LeBron does. No, you can't do what LeBron does. Not physically and not intellectually. Being a basketball player is very hard. Being a coach is very hard. Being a football player is hard. Being a soccer player is hard. People seem to think that being a senator is easy. Like they think you just go and kiss babies and use ribbons to open up what used to be shopping malls. No. Like, have you ever tried to read legislation? It's complicated. Like, you actually have to be a smart person. And I know there's this tendency by some people on the right to love former athletes, right? Oh, whether it's Herschel Walker or Tommy Tuberville. I'm telling you, I don't think it's indicative of how all athletes are, but I don't trust Tommy Tuberville to read the instructions on the back of a VCR from 1978, let alone figure out what actual legislation is. And if I don't think Tommy Tuberville is smart, and he used to actually coach, which takes some skills, how anybody could think that Herschel Walker is up for this task, clearly they are smoking something that is now legal in about 47 states.
Yeah, it's remarkable, but they put out, the Republican Party put out a lot of candidates with interesting backgrounds and characters.
Candidates, yes.
What was the strategy behind that? Like, I mean, But look, there's so many places I can go with this because I still always love your, the polls ain't
Go
loyal
to all
comment.
of them. Go to all of them. I'll let you drive. I'll let you drive.
But I'm just saying, like, is it because of the ineffectiveness of, let me not say ineffectiveness, but maybe the lack of reliability of polling these days, why they were not aware that some of these candidates were just not good?
No. So as Holly and Michael know that I always joke. I always say, hey, these polls ain't loyal, right? Like there's some inconsistency and lack of reliability in polling. But it's not the polling is wrong or bad. It's just called arrogance, right? Like imagine it in a sports context of like you really think, we always talk about in football, any given Sunday, one team can beat another, right? But at the end of the season, a lot of times you'll have a team that says, you know what? We already think we're going to make the playoffs. We think we're set. I'm not even going to play my starters this week. That's what a lot of Republicans in the Republican House and Senate did this year. They're like, we don't really have to play our starters. We don't have to recruit the best candidates. Joe Biden is unpopular. His popularity is under 50%. People don't necessarily like Vice President Harris. The economy is not doing great. We're still dealing with COVID. We've still got mass shootings going on in this country. Gas prices are going up. They thought that they could put out anybody and still end up winning because history suggests that you can basically put out a cheese sandwich and still win in the midterm elections. But young people in particular in this country said, no, we're kind of unhappy with that ending abortion thing and you guys putting guns in the hands of everybody who wants to shoot up nightclubs, and it didn't work. So Nat, it wasn't that they weren't reading the polls, they were reading history, and the polls had something else to say.
Yeah, so I'm just curious because, well, actually, I don't know because we've had you on since, but what were your thoughts? I've never gotten them, I don't think, on the night, like on election night. Were you surprised by the results, how it went for like the Dems and the Republicans, or was that what you were expecting?
No, I wasn't surprised that night because I no longer had any expectations, right? Like the polling was so unreliable and so inconsistent the 2 or 3 days heading in. There was some stuff I didn't believe. I never thought Dr. Oz was going to win. Like I didn't think that was going to be the case. I kind of had an idea that Walker and Warnock will probably go to a runoff. But nationally, no. I think there's sometimes, and I am a trained political science professor, but sometimes you gotta let them know that you don't know. So I was out of the prediction business about a week before the election. So what happened, while it's unprecedented, we haven't seen some versions of this in almost 100 years where the first-term president not only gained seats in the Senate, but also flipped some state houses and everything else like that. It was as likely to me as anything else at that point because I thought the numbers were all over the place.
So I live in a state that is being blamed for the Democrats losing the House. But just as a New Yorker, I'm just wondering, what do you think about what's going on in New York? Because I mean, I've been like, listen, y'all, New York is really kind of more like purple or, outside of the city. So I'm a little nervous about what's happening in New York and what are your thoughts on what's happening in the state and what the Democratic Party needs to do there?
This is what's kind of funny about that. And I always say this to people because like I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. I'm a patriot. I care about my country. It's where all my stuff is and where I pay taxes. Here's the thing. Most people will tell you, New Yorkers will tell you, that the state's always been purple, right? In America, the whole red state, blue state thing is kind of a lazy heuristic. It's like a shortcut that people have come up with, kind of like saying momentum in a football or basketball game. It's not real. You can't really record it. Most states that are blue are only about 10 to 15% blue. Most states that are red are only 12 to 15% red, right? Like there's still, even in a red state like Alabama, you still got 37% of the population that votes for the Democrat for president. So New York has always been that way. What you end up having, though, is occasionally New Yorkers, if we talk about the city in particular, they tend to like some tough guy attitude nonsense, which is where you end up with mayors like Eric Adams, who seems content on giving more money to police officers because he's a former officer himself, and all sorts of problems that stem from that. So I think Democrats need to reevaluate what progressive values are in that state rather than always trying to compromise with people who sound cool but don't necessarily get the job.
Hey, thanks for watching Brother from Another on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe before you leave and be sure to watch us 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Peacock. Appreciate you.